Padang lagi ya? Enggak. Ayam geprek guys.
Pakai tahu Nike
Beli sepatu.
lantai
CCTV lah guys.
nggak kelihatan
Di rumah.
jadi dari setiap ada pergerakan orang setiap foto ini
Ibu kayak mana nih? Kurang yang kurang ikut gua. Batu ikut tuh yang warna coklat loh. Ibu tahu satu tuh baik.
biru
Asli ku yang biru tuh lah, lame ya sih tuh modelnya. Maksudnya lame kan? Patu lah, rada kusem lah ibaratnya.
macam tua biru
Dia tidak kelihatan pergerakan. Kenapa naik kah? Tuh bilang.
Tadi turun 98 tuh.
Aduh.
enggak ada dari situ terlalu sempit
Makan guys, makan. Tenang yang mantau banyak kami.
tetot kalian ini ya mau ngeprank
Dekat sini ada JNT.
pasti ada Ini lah.
Jauh. Jauh gimana?
Kenyang guys. Kita cerita dulu. Kan guys. Enggak. Jangan pedas. Udah lah. Kan orang udut. Mana yang nggak udut memang? Kan lu guys makan biar sehat kalian.
Mbak, ah? Di samping situ,
Oh.
Mbak. Hmm. Oh. harian.
Iya, baru
Harian.
sadarnya tuh tadi malam.
Hmm.
Oh iya.
Oh.
Oh iya, kayaknya yang bisa diambil sama sepatu. Kalau masuk udah pasti nggak bakal
Nggak
bisa. Iya,
Iya. Nggak terduga ya Mbak ya. Iya Mbak.
Apa sih guys?
Pasti nanya Mbak. Kayak gitu.
Enggak. Dia ada kehilangan dari sepatu. Ngomong mesti gembok sih.
Apa yang dapat sepatu?
sepatu. Sepatu dulu.
Itu sepatu lari kan baca kayak ngano.
Lagi. Beda deh sepatu lari. Masa kan meeting pakai sepatu lari.
Berarti mun anu kan bentuk kan. Ya kayak sepatu sport itu. Reebok kan kayak sepatu sport, sepatu basket itu adalah.
Istirahat dulu guys, istirahat guys.
Kayak apa kayak gitu.
Kan rame kayak punya kayak yang Reebok tuh, bukan sepatu bukan sepatu running.
Yang sepatu
Sama yang udah kayak mereka.
Abang Reebok kalau kayak itu?
Oh,
Hmm.
cuman agak tebel dikit. Bukan model yang ini, bukan model yang sepatu running, sepatu apa? Sepatu apa model? Sepatu
Ya kayak anu kayak beda.
cuman agak tebel dikit.
Istirahat dulu guys, istirahat guys. Udah capek kalian.
Bukan sepatu running.
Terus Anjir longsor lagi nih mah bau-baunya. Adik.
Tatot. Tatot.
Mau tempat lo ya?
Istirahat guys, istirahat. Coba besok ini mau bikin konten ya. Reses. Pas gak nyoba. Masih gak tahu dapat apa enggak itu kan. Oh, hope kah nggak tahu nih. Kayaknya sih enggak sih kayaknya. Origin enggak aku. Ada MT jam sekarang, bukan sekarang. Nanti pagi. Akun Google di PC ku penuh. Cara logoutnya gimana ya? Mau ganti akun. Langsung logout semua dulu Gmailnya kak. Itu ada sync out all account. Dikeluarin dulu semuanya. Kayaknya mahal bang Cinjok. Kan udah aku bilang mahal. Ini mau aku bahas nih. Kamu klik Google, nanti di situ ada pojok kanan, ke pojok kanan bawah itu, dari pojok paling atas ada lambang Googlemu. Kamu klik, kamu scroll paling bawah semua akunnya, di paling bawahnya ada sync out all account.
Gue kasih out semua ya?
Udah.
Ya kan? Untung udah beli.
Ya.
Ya hati-hati ya. Nah, oh sebenarnya.
Yang record dulu.
Ada usah ada unlock ya. Ya, betul balance semua.
Allah, tinggal dihapus. Udah saya, aku oh bentar ya. Yo, halo semua. Hari-hari listrik mati. Apakah? Oh iya, udah 75 ya. Belum santai lah. Bang, aku habis beli kru, mantap jiwa.
This thing could be a physical or a special attacker or a mixed attacker. It was almost always at least partially a physical attacker because its signature move Dragon Ascent was very powerful and was required for it to Mega Evolve. One key difference about Mega Rayquaza and other Mega Evolution is that the catch for using other Mega Evolution was that you had to give up your item slot. All Mega Pokemon had to hold the Mega Stone, right? Rayquaza was the exception. Rayquaza was allowed to Mega Evolve as long as it had access to its signature move Dragon Ascent, which was a remarkably broken attack. This is basically like flying type close combat, and giving a move with that high base power to a Pokemon like Rayquaza made it very powerful. Flying is a deceptively good offensive type. It doesn't always feel that way because there's not that many consistent special attacking flying moves. They all miss, and then the physical attacking flying moves are, the good one is Brave Bird, right? And then you just knock yourself out, so you don't get to see it all that often. But yeah, like flying is a very powerful offensive type. Mega Rayquaza also gets access to the move Extreme Speed, which is actually just 80 base power and a higher priority level than other priority attacks. So it actually goes before Sucker Punch and I guess Thunderclap as well, even if the attacking priority user of Sucker Punch and Thunderclap is faster than the Extreme Speed user. Rayquaza can boost itself with Swords Dance or Dragon Dance. Swords Dance was typically better, and when I used it to win the World Championships, I used the Focus Ash item to keep it alive. I also used Mega Rayquaza to win the North American Internationals back in 2019 using an Assault Vest set. Most Dragon-type Pokemon have very deep, wide-reaching move pools. They tend to learn all the elemental moves, but in Rayquaza's case, it learns every type of move in the game. Dragon Ascent and Extreme Speed were standard on pretty much every set, but you could use moves like Earth Power, Icy Wind, Overheat, Crunch was used occasionally to get like Lunala. I think people ran water moves at one point to try and KO Primal Groudon, like Waterfall. Yeah, that was definitely used a little bit. I'd forgotten, but yeah. Something I haven't even mentioned about Mega Rayquaza, I don't need to go in depth on the stats. Like, look at these things. They're completely broken. Like, the stats are just absurd. Moving on. The ability. So base Rayquaza's ability Airlock basically says, while Rayquaza is on the field, don't consider any weather, which is nice. It's nice to have this ability. It's nice because Mega Rayquaza was used in partnership with Kyogre a lot, or with other Pokemon with water type moves, because Primal Groudon had a quadruple weakness to water type moves, and the thing is, you wouldn't need to Mega Evolve Rayquaza in order to overwrite the weather. So you could just switch Rayquaza in, even if it was in its base form, and temporarily disable the weather, which would let your partner then KO Primal Groudon, or you could use it to weaken Kyogre's water type moves, or get around Thunder accuracy if you were feeling lucky, right? Mega Rayquaza's Delta Stream is basically a souped up version of Airlock. When Rayquaza Mega Evolves, Delta Stream activates, and it overwrites all other weather on the field. The downside of Delta Stream is that it can be overwritten by other primal weathers, whereas Airlock always takes priority. But the advantage of Delta Stream is that it turns off all the weaknesses of your flying type Pokemon. In other words, if Mega Rayquaza gets hit with an electric move, it's a resisted hit, and if it gets hit with an ice move, it only does twice as much damage instead of quadruple as much damage. This also applied to your partner. So when I won North American Internationals in 2019, I paired Rayquaza with Celesteela, who doesn't really feel that much like a flying type, but being able to turn off its weakness to like electric and get a resistance to rock and stuff like that was really nice. I'm not even gonna lie, that was pretty good. It doesn't turn off the flying type completely either. Like, you still keep the resistances and immunities of flying, right? You're still immune to ground, you still resist fighting, whatever, but you only lose the weaknesses. It is worth noting that if Mega Rayquaza ever switched out, then this ability would go away, but I mean, that's the same is true for Airlock, right? So this is basically just a strict upgrade. One other advantage of Delta Stream is that it actually overwrites the opposing weather, whereas Airlock kind of just disables it. To give you an idea of how this works, if Primal Sun is up and, you know, regular Rayquaza switches in and then goes down, like before Mega Evolving, the Primal Sun is still up. Like, while Rayquaza is on the field, the Primal Sun is being ignored. As soon as Rayquaza goes away, like it faints or switches, the Primal Sun is still there. Whereas with Mega Evolution, with Delta Stream, if you Mega Evolve Rayquaza, overwrite the Primal Sun, and then lose Rayquaza, there's just no weather, which is, yeah, like one of the only ways that you could get rid of Primal Groudon Sun without knocking it out or forcing it to switch. Anyway, Mega Rayquaza was like one of the best Mega Evolutions in both 2016 and 2019. It was also one of the best restricted Pokemon in both those years. It won multiple tournaments. I'm responsible for some of those, but yeah, like even generally, it was just considered such a strong Pokemon. It wasn't even only used with Kyogre too. Like, people used it with Groudon, people used it with Xerneas. I think people used it with Lunala. I definitely brought that to Worlds. Wasn't my best idea, but I did it. And even though it was never like like the top restricted Pokemon in its format, in large part because of how strong Xerneas was and Primal Groudon. It was always in contention for top 5 and was a really consistent, reliable, powerful Pokemon that you could rely on to lead you to victory. Okay, our number 4 slot, and I have to tell you, I think that for the actual list, we are now done with legendary Pokemon, which is crazy. Like the legendary Pokemon took the bottom 4 slots, top 4 slots, we have non-legendaries. You probably can guess some of the Pokemon on this list. Coming in at number 4 is Dragapult. Dragapult is a more recent addition than some of the Pokemon on our list, but I think that it's definitely proved itself as one of the best dragon type Pokemon of all time. Dragapult is a dragon and ghost type Pokemon, which is really cool because previously that typing was kind of locked behind Giratina, and Giratina's not very good. This is the only time I'll mention Giratina on the list, so congratulations Giratina, you made it into the video. Not talking about you again. Anyway, Dragapult is a lot better. Dragon and Ghost is really cool because both are very powerful offensive types, so you can hit a lot of Pokemon for really big damage and it's difficult to resist. But it also is nice because you get immunities to normal and fighting type moves, which is a big deal because Dragapult is really fast, and fast Pokemon typically struggle against Fake Out. Being immune to Fake Out, Extreme Speed, and a couple other common moves is just overall really nice. When I say Dragapult is really fast, I mean other than Regieleki or like Calyrex, Shadow, and Zacian, who are only occasionally allowed, Dragapult is like the fastest Pokemon you'll see in a format unless it's boosting its speed in some way. And this is really nice because it's a very offensive Pokemon that can dish out a ton of damage. Its ability Clear Body prevents its attack stat from being lowered, meaning it doesn't have the problems that a lot of other physical attacking Pokemon do of being weak to Intimidate. And it gets a signature move called Dragon Dart, which is a little bit weird. Dragon Dart is basically like, I don't want to call it a better version of Dragon Claw. If it only has one target, it's a better version of Dragon Claw, where you have 2 50 base power little Dreepies that get shot at the opponent instead of one 80 base power move. The thing is, if your opponent has 2 targets, then Dragon Darts is kind of weak because it will hit each of them one time with one of the little Dreepies. What's nice about Dragon Darts though is it has smart targeting, where like, let's say you target your opponent's left slot and they protect, then both Dreepies will be redirected into the right slot. So it's actually pretty cute. Dragapult has a major weakness, and that is that it doesn't have a good reliable ghost type move. It does have Phantom Force, which allows it to vanish and then reappear, but the problem is that this is really abusable because it takes 2 turns instead of 1. If I Phantom Force you're like, I don't know, ghost type Pokemon, you can just switch into a dark or a normal type and then have no issues dealing with Dragapult the next turn. The reason Dragapult overcame this is because it was able to use the signature mechanics of each generation to get around it. Dragapult was one of the best Dynamax Pokemon because it was so fast. It had really useful max moves. It often used Phantasm to lower the opponent's defense stat, getting around the 2-turn requirement of Phantom Force because all Dynamax moves were 1 turn. It could use Max Airstream to support the speed of its teammate. It could use Max Steel Spike to boost its defense. It could use Max Wormwind to lower the attack stat of the opponent. It was one of the best Dynamax Pokemon for almost all of Sword and Shield. And then when Generation 9 came around, we were like, okay, like, well, Dragapult was pretty good, but I don't know. Like, I mean, it's like, doesn't really seem like it can keep up. It lost Dynamax. Like, it's probably not good now, right? Dragapult went on to win the North American International Championships and placed 2nd at the World Championships. And it kind of used Terastallization as a mini Dynamax. Like, it would use Terra Ghost, Terra Blast, and get that powerful 1-turn move and use the Choice Band to boost its damage output even further. With Choice Band Dragapult and Terra Ghost, Terra Blast, you had a Pokemon that was being boosted by Choice Band and the Terra, who only needed to use 1 turn to attack, and it was faster than pretty much every other Pokemon in the game and resisted the primary Choice Scarf Pokemon, Urshifu. Terra Ghost also works defensively, where it turns off Dragon's weakness to Fairy and Ice and a couple other types as well. Well, one other type, Dragon, I should say. Sorry, brain went into autopilot there. Anyway, Ghost is a pretty decent defensive type as well as offensive because you lose a couple weaknesses, and yeah, that's like overall pretty nice, right? If Dragapult had only been good in Sword and Shield, I might have put it towards the bottom of the list or definitely on the honorable mentions, but because it's actually done very well in Scarlet and Violet, despite the fact that most people underestimated it and didn't think it was going to be viable. I mean, I'll be guilty of that. I tested Dragapult. I thought it wasn't very good, but yeah, like I was proven wrong. I think this high placement is definitely deserved. I mean, in just 2 generations, Dragapult has had some of the most insane results of any Pokemon maybe ever. That's not entirely true. I think it's had some of the most insane results of any Pokemon that people underestimated. You know what I mean? Like, there's one thing if like, you know, Cresselia pops off, right? Or like, okay, well, it's Cresselia, right? It looks that good. But with Dragapult, sure, in Sword and Shield it looked good, but in Scarlet and Violet, I mean, not so much. And so I think that's really cool, and I wanted to include it this high up. Before we get to the top 3, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Sometimes I yap about these a lot, and so I'm trying to be better, especially for the poor editors who are working so hard on these videos. So I'm going to try and be briefer with these honorable mentions than I normally am. Also, there's more than normal. These aren't ordered, by the way. Ultra Necrozma. I want to talk about Ultra Necrozma because it's technically a Psychic and Dragon type, despite the fact that, well, I guess all 3 of the base Necrozmas aren't Dragon type. This got 2nd at the World Championships the only year it was legal. It's really strong and has this signature move called Light That Burns My Eyes, which is a really powerful Z move. I'm not even sure if we're allowed to show it to you or we'll get copyrighted, but maybe you're seeing it right now. Maybe you're not. I have no idea. Anyway, it was really strong and almost won the World Championships. It was one of the top Pokemon in Ultra Sun and Moon, and it might never come back again unless we get Z moves again. Kind of like Mega Rayquaza's mechanic. I don't want to get into it now. Bye-bye. Not actually bye-bye. Let's talk about one of my favorite Dragon type Pokemon. I couldn't justify putting it on the main list, but I wanted to talk about it here. Dracovish. Dracovish was a menace in early Sword and Shield, but it's not in Scarlet and Violet, so I didn't think I could include it. Sword and Shield's kind of unfair, right? Because all the live events were canceled, so it's hard to judge Pokemon, especially early Sword and Shield where there were no events, because Dracovish got, I think, second or first at an international, but then like all events were canceled, so we didn't really get to see more development. I love Dracovish. I'm terrified if it ever comes back because it's so strong, but I'm, you know, obviously it's one of my favorite Pokemon, so I really hope it comes back at some point. Right now, it couldn't make the main list, but like, I mean, if it ever came back, I think it could justify a spot on this list because it's just unbelievably strong. Como, of all the Pokemon on the honorable mentions list, this is the one that's closest to making it onto the real list. There's a case that I probably should have put it on this list, to be honest, but I decided not to because number one, I hate it, but number two, I just didn't think it had the results. Como was one of the strongest Pokemon in Generation 7 because it had a signature Z move called Clangorous Soul Blaze, or I don't remember what it was called. It was really strong and hit both opponents, and it gave Como a stat boost. They kind of kept the spirit of the Z move alive by giving it a signature move in Generation 8 or Generation 9. Como didn't really see much use in Generation 8. It was really good in Generation 7. There was compositions built around it where you try to get the Z move off, like do a ton of damage, get boosted, support the Como, use Mega Gengar to get rid of the Fairy type Pokemon. It was pretty strong. Generation 8, almost no results. And then Generation 9, it has a new identity where it actually won a regional as an Iron Defense Body Press user, taking advantage of Terrestrialization to turn off its terrible typing. I said so many T's. Oh my God. I just won the T Olympics. Holy cow. Oh my God. T. Cut that out of the video. Como isn't like a mainstay, but it does pop up every now and again in Scarlet and Violet, and so if it had a little bit more results, I would have included it, but I don't know, it just hasn't been good enough in Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet to include it yet, but I think in the future it could definitely be good again. It's a cool Pokemon, and I hate it a lot less now that the Z move is gone. Goodra. Goodra has two forms, and it's always a good Pokemon, but it's rarely a great Pokemon. I didn't feel like I could include it here. Right now, like the more dominant set has been the Iron Defense Body Press set. Its stats look so good, but it just feels so bad whenever I use it. Goodra's been good a couple times, but like, I don't know. Maybe it should have been on this list. Goodra's another one that could have been here. There's just so many good Dragon-type Pokemon. Dragonite. I made the best Kanto Pokemon video, and I got a lot of comments asking about Dragonite, and I just want to say I don't think Dragonite has been that good in the history of competitive Pokemon. Like, it really was never used until Scarlet and Violet, and you were able to Terrestrialize. I know it was good in single battles, but that's not what we're talking about here, okay? Anyway, it's been great in Scarlet and Violet. It hasn't been very good in really any other format. Giovanni Costa would disagree with me. He's used it before, but it was not like a popular pick or anything, or a very commonly thought to be good Pokemon for pretty much any time before Scarlet and Violet, so I couldn't include it, but it's been so good in Scarlet and Violet that it definitely deserves a spot in the honorable mentions. Lastly, Palkia. Palkia is typically considered to be a better restricted Pokemon than Dialga, but it hasn't quite hit the same peaks. It did most recently get top 4 at the World Championships the last time it was legal. I thought about putting it on this list if I had a couple more spots like Goodra and Como and Palkia. These were the Pokemon I would have been considering, but yeah, I didn't want to have more spots because I'm trying not to make the editors cry when they work on this video, so I'm trying. I know these videos are long, I'm sorry. Anyway, that's the honorable mentions, and everybody typed good job, Wolf. You did such a good job at your job. Good job in the comments because I got through faster than normal, I'm pretty sure. Number 3 is a really cool dragon type Pokemon added in Pokemon. It feels like it was added in X and Y, but I think it was black and white. Yeah, it was black and white. Hydreigon. Hydreigon. I think it's Hydreigon. Please don't yell at me. I promise I'm trying. Hydreigon is a dark and dragon type Pokemon that really doesn't like fairies. But there were no fairy type Pokemon when Hydreigon was added back in 2011 in Pokemon Black and White. I guess to describe how Hydreigon works is it's kind of like Latios, but because the stats and typing are different, it ends up playing a bit differently. Dark does add some weaknesses, but it's one of the few types in the game that resists Ghost, and it gives you an immunity, which Psychic doesn't give you any immunities. And so Hydreigon with like Dragon's nice defensive typing, and then Dark has some nice defensive benefits as well. It actually lets it play like a Pokemon that's pretty difficult to remove if you don't have a way to hit it for super effective damage. It's also remarkably powerful. Like, its Draco Meteors hit very, very hard, and that's part of the reason why in both 2011 and 2012, Hydreigon won the World Championships. It went 2 for 2 in its first 2 years. The Levitate ability is also really nice, where just like being immune to ground type attacks ends up being a really big deal because ground is such a good type, and when Hydreigon already has another immunity, then that's 2 immunities to 2 different types. It's very valuable. Dark is also another really good type to pair with Dragon because Hydreigon often would run Draco Meteor as a Dragon type move, and the problem with Draco Meteor is once you hit something, you lose 2 stages of special attack until you switch, which isn't always easy to do. And Dark is just a really consistent offensive type. Like, there aren't that many types in the game that resist it, and so you can just consistently put out damage with Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse also has a high chance to flinch. Hydreigon has nice coverage moves, Flamethrower and Earth Power. These are just really good at hitting Steel type Pokemon that resist Hydreigon, so that's really nice. And yeah, really good Pokemon in Black and White. But then X and Y came out, and we were like, oh, I guess that's the end of Hydreigon. You know, Fairy type is out now. It resists both of its moves. It's quadruple weak to Fairy. I guess that's it. And then in the first year of X and Y, Hydreigon was consistently one of the strongest Pokemon. Despite the fact that it is so awful into Fairy types, it turns out that like the things that make it strong are still just strong as long as you deal with Fairy type Pokemon. Hydreigon had really nice synergy with Aegislash. Actually, can we show this on the screen? Hydreigon and Aegislash have like the most insane synergy you've ever seen. Hydreigon is weak to fighting, ice, bug, dragon, Fairy type moves off the top of my head. Aegislash resists all of them. Aegislash is weak to ghost, dark, fire, ground type moves, and Hydreigon is resist or is immune to all of them. Like, it's perfect synergy. This year, by the way, there were a lot of good Fairy type Pokemon. Like Gardevoir won the World Championships, Mega Mawile was really good, Wigglytuff won a regional, Klefki was used. I'm sure there's Fairy type Pokemon I'm forgetting actually. Like all these Fairy types were really, really strong. Hydreigon was still able to hang despite the fact that it never got hit with a Fairy type move. It would go bye-bye. One thing that I think people don't talk about with Hydreigon is that even though it got really nerfed going into Generation 6 with the introduction of Fairy type Pokemon, it received a minor buff, which is that Steel type Pokemon, which are already overtuned. Like they got the resistance to Fairy. For some reason, I don't know why they felt the need to give the best defensive type in the game another resistance, but they did remove the resistances to Ghost and Dark. So prior to X and Y, Hydreigon was resisted with both of its types by Steel types, like both Dragon and Dark were resisted by Steel. As of X and Y, it could hit Steel type Pokemon with Dark Pulse, which is a big deal because it made Hydreigon one of the best answers to Aegislash, one of the best Pokemon in the game. Anyway, the rest of Generation 6 played out and Hydreigon was good. It popped up occasionally. It kind of fell off as the years went on and the power creep like got more intense. And then in Sun and Moon, Hydreigon like wasn't allowed at first. In the last year of the format, like that was when we had restricted Pokemon and Xerneas, so Hydreigon wasn't used very much. It saw a little play in the middle, but nothing crazy. I thought, okay, well maybe Hydreigon has finally fallen off. Like there's power creep and you know all this other stuff as well. Nope. Sword and Shield comes out and Hydreigon is a top threat. I mean, it's not like on every single team or anything, and it's definitely more of like an undercurrent. Like it's probably not a top 20 most used Pokemon, but it's around there. You know what? It might have been top 20 actually, now that I think about it. It wasn't top 10, but it was like in conversation. It was a Pokemon you had to prepare for or something you had to be worried about. It was a really scary Pokemon to go against in the Dynamax format because it comboed with itself, right? Where Max Darkness lowered the target's special defense and Hydreigon was a special attacker, and so you could very quickly snowball it out of control. Anyway, then the pandemic happened, and so we lost events for a while, so it's impossible to say how Hydreigon would have done if the events had continued. And then Scarlet and Violet came out and it was once again one of the top Pokemon. It actually benefited so much from Terrestrialization because it didn't have to worry about its terrible weakness to Fairy for the first time. And so you could run Terra Fire to get both an offensive boost and a defensive boost because it often ran Flamethrower or Heat Wave. You could run Terra Poison just for the defenses, and like then you'd only have one weakness because you're immune to ground. Really, really cool Pokemon. And actually it was used as an answer to Dondozo a lot of the time, where people would run Focus Energy Hydreigon with a scope lens and Draco Meteor would be guaranteed crit, and so you could just crit KO Dondozo in a single hit. It was a really cool tech and I think it was really, really neat. Anyway, you get the point. Hydreigon has been one of the best dragon type Pokemon across generations. It has 2 World Championship victories to its name, and overall I think it definitely deserves a spot in the top 3. Okay, we're into the top 2 and I went back and forth on these two a lot. Like even recording this video, I just had to double check results because I was like, maybe you should be in the other order. You probably know what they both are. I mean, it's 2 of the most iconic dragon type Pokemon of all time. In the number 2 slot, I am putting Salamence. Salamence is, in my opinion, one of the coolest competitive Pokemon because it's good both in and out of its Mega Evolution. Salamence has won the World Championships 2 times, almost a decade apart, in 2009 and then later in 2018. Psst, it's me from the future. I realized that Mega Salamence won 3 World Championships. It's the only Pokemon on this list that won 3 World Championships. I'm sorry, I totally blanked. As a dragon and flying type, we talked about how this type is good offensively, but the truth is that Salamence may as well be just a pure dragon type, and actually it might benefit a bit more from it if it didn't have the flying secondary typing. While it does give it a resistance to fighting and immunity to ground, both of which are valuable, it does make the ice weakness quadruple, and it doesn't have Delta Stream to help with that, and it also adds a weakness to rock and makes it neutral to electric moves. So overall, I actually think that the typing holds it back a little bit in its base form. And its mega form we'll talk about. Let's just talk about base Salamence. Salamence has the Intimidate ability, which is one of the best abilities in the game, and back in the day it was hard to get good Intimidate users. Nowadays we don't have to worry about that actually. Nowadays we have Intimidate users that are probably too good. But back in the day it was hard to get a good Pokemon that was like really strong and also had Intimidate. Like there were definitely a couple, but it was not the same thing that we see nowadays. Although Salamence's stats encourage it to be more of a physical attacker, in competitive Pokemon it was actually often used more as a special attacker because of how strong Draco Meteor is. And something that's neat about Salamence is that it's just very versatile. It has a wide-reaching move pool. It gets fire moves, water moves, dragon moves, no flying moves. It gets rock Rock Slide. It gets physical moves, special moves, Earthquake, Dragon Dance, etc. It even gets a couple supporting moves like Tailwind as well. It can be used with Choice Scarf, Choice Specs, Charty Berry, the Fairy Resist Berry that I'm blanking on, Rosalie Berry I think it's called, Assault Vest. Fun fact, in 2017, Mega Evolutions weren't allowed that year in competitive play. Salamence ran this very bulky set that used Bulldoze, which is a very weak ground type move, to activate its partner Metagross's weakness policy, lower the speed of the opponents, not lower Metagross's speed because it has the clear body ability, and then Metagross would try and KO everything. It was a really, really cool strategy that took advantage of Salamence as a bulky defensive Pokemon, normally with the Assault Vest or actually a type resist berry to help keep it alive. Salamence has been a staple on competitive teams throughout the years. It was good in 2017, like I mentioned. It used the Assault Vest set at the beginning of the year. It used Choice Scarf or Dragonium Z at the beginning of the year. At the first tournament, I actually used Dragonium Z, Draco Meteor, Salamence, and it was really strong. Back in Diamond and Pearl, it was a consistent Pokemon that could hold a bunch of different items. It was used a bit in 2012 as well as like a consistent Pokemon with Intimidate. It was an attacker. It could do damage. It was bulky, especially with Intimidate. It shores up its natural defenses a fair bit, making it really respectably bulky. Oh, one thing I want to mention is that by being a special attacking Dragon type with fire coverage, this is part of what made Hydreigon so good. You were just in really good shape because Dragon back in the day, its only real type weakness was Steel, and with fire, you got around that, right? That's part of what made Hydreigon so strong. It's part of what makes Salamence so strong, is the combination of Draco Meteor and Flamethrower is just really oppressive and hard to deal with. Oh, I actually totally forgot. Salamence got second at the World Championships in 2014 using the Habenberry. Habenberry. Having a nice day. I hope you're having a nice day. Oh, I'm gonna lose subscribers for that. Anyway, it was just a bulky attacker. Draco Meteor, Flamethrower, Protect, and actually Rock Tomb to lower the speeds of whatever it hits. So really cool Pokemon. Almost won the World Championships in 2014 as well. Stopped by Pachirisu. Sorry, Salamence. And then there was Mega Salamence. Mega Salamence got a huge buff in the fact that it was actually able to use flying type moves because its ability Aerialate turned all normal type moves into flying type moves. Finally, Salamence could actually be used as a reliable physical attacker as well as a special attacker because it learns a lot of great normal type moves that aren't so great when they're normal type, but as a flying type move, they're actually pretty valuable. Aerialate also gave these moves a power buff, and a lot of them were really strong already, so it became very threatening very quickly. On the special side, Mega Salamence would use Hyper Voice to deal spread damage to the opponent. This is really good. It was consistent against like Primal Groudon, who had lower special defense. It could also use Double Edge on the physical side for immense burst damage, and if you wanted something without recoil, you could use Return or Frustration. Mega Salamence was consistently within the top 5 Mega Evolutions whenever it was around, and sometimes it got all the way up to top 3. It won the World Championships in 2018, and it also... Did it win in Worlds 2019? Oh my god, I totally blanked. Mega Salamence also won the World Championships in 2019. It won in 2018 and 2019. And it wasn't legal in 2017 or 2014. Anyway, yeah, Mega Salamence won in 2018 and 2019 using vastly different sets. In 2019, Mega Salamence actually forgonant. Mega Salamence didn't use a Dragon type move. It used Double Edge, Protect, Tailwind, and Hyper Voice, being able to be used as both a physical or a special attacker, depending on what was in front of it, and supporting its team with Tailwind. In 2018, it was actually used as a setup Pokemon. It used Dragon Dance, Protect, Double Edge, and Roost. It only had a single attack, but that attack was pretty powerful. We were talking earlier about how Raging Bolt was really versatile with its items, and while Mega Salamence wasn't versatile with its items, it's one of the few times I can remember a Pokemon being used in such a variety of different ways while being locked into an item. Mega Salamence could be used primarily as a support Pokemon with Tailwind. It could be used as an offensive sweeper, as a physical attacker with Double Edge. It could be used as a setup sweeper with Dragon Dance. It could be used as a special attacking spread Pokemon, and often you got to pick multiple of these options, right? Like the 2 Salamence that won the World Championships, one of them was a setup sweeper that was also pretty bulky, right? That was cool. It was a physical attacker that could set up. The other one was a support Pokemon that could also output a ton of damage on both the physical or special side, depending on what was needed. It's one of the few times where it was actually optimal to run a nature that lowered one of your defensive stats rather than one of your offensive ones because it was using both its offensive stats. There is a real case that Mega Salamence should be in the #1 slot on our list, and I ultimately decided on #2, but if you think that overall Salamence has done enough to earn its #1 spot in the list, that's completely fair, and I totally see the reasoning. Okay, so all that's left is the #1 slot on our list, the best Dragon type Pokemon of all time. There's really no burying the lead on this one. I'm sure that you all know what it is. I think the best Dragon type Pokemon of all time is Garchomp. Garchomp is a ground and Dragon type Pokemon that, like many other Pokemon on this list, is quadruple weak to ice, but that's not what makes it so threatening. For one thing, it's quite fast, especially back in the day. It was considered to be one of the fastest Pokemon in the game. Pre-Chenpao, pre-Fluttermane, this is back in the good old days, okay? It also has great stats. It hits really hard with its high base attack stat, and it has really respectable bulk that, unless you're hitting it with a powerful super effective move, will probably allow it to survive for a couple turns at the very least. Ground is a really nice type to pair with Dragon because it hits the Steel type Pokemon that caused it so much issues for so long, and yeah, just like Ground is a nice offensive type in general. Garchomp also has two very good abilities. The easier one to understand is Rough Skin, which does a little damage whenever a Pokemon hits it with a contact move. So this could be used for chip damage against Pokemon that have Fake Out or U-Turn or other, random contact moves. It was also very good against Mega Kangaskhan and I guess at times Urshifu, though it was never super it was never used when Urshifu was legal as far as I can remember, but it would have been useful against Urshifu Rapid Strike. Pokemon that can hit multiple times, can take multiple instances of Population Bomb. There was a clip going around at some point of Mousehold knocking itself out on Garchomp's Rough Skin, which I think is funny personally, but Rough Skin isn't the ability that I'm personally more afraid of when it comes to Garchomp. That's Sand Veil, which basically says if the Sandstorm is up, all moves have a chance to miss unless they're sure hit. The fact that Garchomp pairs so well with Tyranitar, like they don't overlap in terms of type synergy, like they don't have that many overlapping weaknesses beyond Fairy, which, like didn't even exist for a while, made this pairing super threatening, and you could even augment that even further by using moves like Substitute to buy yourself extra lives, basically, and some people even use the item Bright Powder to potentially dodge even more attacks. So it has good typing, good stats, good abilities, but the reason why it's the #1 slot on my list is that Garchomp was meta game defining. Entire formats revolved around it, and I think that is deserving of the #1 slot in the list, even though it has one fewer World Championship victory. Garchomp was one of the top Mons back in 2012, and it ended up winning the World Championships. It also was one of the top Mons in 2014, and it won the World Championships that year as well. It was normally trained to be fast and strong, but occasionally you'd see people deviate. I won the US National Championships back in 2012 with a very bulky substitute Havenberry Garchomp that was so tanky it could even set up a substitute after taking a Latios Dragon Gem Draco Meteor, which wasn't supposed to be possible, but Garchomp just has such great stats that if you were willing to forego speed, you could actually tank this. Sometimes Garchomp would run Life Orb, sometimes it would run Yachi Berry, sometimes it would run Focus Sash, sometimes it would run Bright Powder. It was a very scary Pokemon to go up against. I didn't even name all the items. Choice Band was used, Havenberry was used, very versatile Pokemon. It was just so hard to counter Garchomp, which sounds silly because it had a quadruple weakness to Ice, but surprisingly, it's a little bit hard to pin down. And because it's so much faster than a lot of the Pokemon that were around it in the years where it was really exceptional, if you preserved it well and kept its health high, it could come in at the end of the game and just completely take over. By being a ground type Pokemon, Garchomp also gets access to moves like Rock Slide, which could allow it to really have high variance moments where it would just flinch out the opponent. Even though Rock Slide wasn't that strong when being used by Garchomp, like it could always influence the battle with positive luck going your direction. And that's not even talking about Sandville compounding with Rock Slide flinch chance. Garchomp could also be used as a setup sweeper. Swords Dance Garchomp was popular at times, and yeah, like bringing Garchomp when it was threatening something, getting them to protect or play defensive and switch out, setting up a Swords Dance and then running away with the game. It's pretty scary, and it was something that happened, at least to me, a fair few times. Garchomp has suffered a lot from the introduction of Landorus Therian, because Landorus Therian is in many ways just a better Garchomp, which is crazy to say, but it is true. I mean, Landorus Therian stats are better. They both have the quadruple ice weakness. Intimidate is on the whole a much more useful ability, and that's part of the reason why Garchomp hasn't been able to keep up so much. Unlike Salamence, it wasn't gifted oh my god, it was gifted a Mega Evolution. Unlike Salamence, it wasn't gifted a very good Mega Evolution. Mega Garchomp is just strictly worse than regular Garchomp across the board. Despite that, Garchomp still pops up every now and again. It was used a little bit in early Scarlet and Violet before Landorus Therian came back. But even though it's no longer reaching the peaks that it once did, I still want to include Garchomp as the #1 slot because I think it's important to recognize how rare it is for a Pokemon to be in contention for the best Pokemon in a format in multiple different generations. Keep in mind, by the way, that Garchomp was in contention for the best non-Mega Evolved Pokemon in 2014, the year where they added the Fairy type, in part to counter Garchomp. It didn't even work at first. Eventually it caught up to him. I'm sorry, Garchomp. They made Fluttermane. I don't know how to tell you this. And so even though Garchomp has one fewer Worlds victory than Salamence, it's still the #1 in my heart and on my list. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, but it's a little bit too fantastical for you, maybe check out the video I made on the best normal types. Normal doesn't sound very exciting, but there are a lot of really cool and creative and just like completely unorthodox Pokemon that happen to be normal. The name is kind of a misnomer. I think you'll like the video. You should check it out.